Welcome to the AI Adoption Podcast. I'm your host, Professor Ashley Braganza. And for this episode, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Alex Dalman from VCCP and Faith, a marketing and advertising agency. Alex, welcome to the podcast. And before we get started, could I just ask you to introduce yourself and say a little bit about the agency as well, please?
Of course. Great to be here, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Alex Dalman. I run an agency within the VCCP group, which is one of the UK's largest advertising agencies. I run a kind of division called Faith, and Faith is our AI creative agency. We set that up 2 years ago now, so we've been on this journey for quite a while, and it was kind of born out of the generative AI explosion. So after the likes of ChatGPT coming onto the scene, we realized from a marketing and creative perspective that actually this is going to be pretty game changing, and we needed to get in there quickly and to stay ahead. So Faith was born out of that. We're a collective of about 20 specialists within the VCP group, kind of ranging from innovation leads, tech leads, creatives, strategists, and myself. And our mission is to ensure that the kind of creative industry as a whole and VCCP stays ahead of this enormous technological change. Very much like when websites came along, apps came along on phones, the marketing industry has had to change quite a bit over the last 20 years. And this is the next big one. So, yeah, Faith, we're a very passionate team. We love new technology. We are kind of trying out tools all the time. And the main purpose is to really see if those tools are useful for the advertising and creative industries, or if they're good for maybe some things, but not good for other things, or they're good on certain client problems, but not others, or to see if actually they're okay at the moment, but maybe in 6 months' time, they might be even better and game changing. So yeah, that's the mission of Faith, is to stay ahead of that kind of change, and also to then advise our clients on what kind of AI strategies and creative ideas to adopt to help them also stay ahead.
Great. Thank you for that introduction, Alex. So you've been working in this sector with clients in the kind of human era where people were doing the job. Now you've kind of gone into the space where AI is doing the job. So go on, tell us, is AI better than, equal to, or worse than human beings doing the job?
I wouldn't say AI is doing the job just yet. There's quite a lot of talk in the industry about AI replacing humans, and maybe that will happen one day. But at the moment, we firmly believe that yes, these tools are amazing and they will help people do their jobs either better, in some cases worse as well. We have to be honest about that. And I think it's more that we're in the mantra of human plus AI is actually the most powerful. So it's quite interesting at the moment. There are probably more tools out there than we could ever imagine, and more technology than we can ever imagine. But if you don't have the people able to use those tools, trained up on using them, know what they're good for, know what they're not good for, then it's sort of that's going to be the limit of the technology. It won't be, the technology probably will get better and better, but that's sort of at odds with, well, that's okay if people actually know how to use it. If they don't know how to use it, then it's sort of useless. So, well, yeah, we're in this funny part at the moment. So we had obviously, like the normal hype curve, loads of interest, adoption, people, going quite crazy for it, and it was, very exciting. I think we are definitely in the slight trough of disillusionment where people have gone, oh, I need to actually learn things now, and I need to learn a new skill, and I need to learn how to use these tools, and it becomes quite overwhelming. So yeah, it's fascinating to see how some adoption has happened, because there's loads that happens behind the scenes that you wouldn't even know is AI, and I think people probably forget some of that. But then there is the actual use case of how it will apply to helping creative ideas come to fruition. That is the edge that we're more interested in. Or else AI is a massive topic, and you can kind of it gets too massive for anyone to kind of to think about. So where we're more interested is creativity has always been very subjective and hard to define and hard to predict, and that's obviously the beauty of it as well. And I think if you put creativity with AI, it's where the magic can happen. So a very good example of this is how creatives within faith, they saw an opportunity to use the new generative AI tools to try and tackle one of the biggest problems out there, which is scamming. So like fraudulent calls, fraudulent texts, we've all had them. They're very annoying. They actually, a lot of money is lost every year through fraudulent texts. And one of our clients, O2, which is a UK telco network, they obviously have a massive problem with fraudulent activity on people's accounts, but they also have a problem with scam messages being sent through their network. So if you imagine how many fake DHL, HMRC texts are sent through the network, that actually can damage the quality of the network working for you and I and everyone else trying to use it, on a daily basis. So it's a massive problem. And so yeah, our creatives thought, well, if there is this massive problem, could AI actually help? And so they came up with an idea which we've called Daisy versus Scammers. Daisy is a AI granny, and her one mission in life is to waste phone scammers' time. Because she's an AI, she's got all the time in the world. She doesn't eat, she doesn't sleep, and she can talk to them at length. And while she's talking to them, it means they're not scamming real customers. So it's a sort of diversion tactic to get them away from customers. And it's proved really popular because I think people just like the fact that, we've actually used AI for a good for once. It was not a negative story. I think people were quite sick of seeing the whole doom and gloom about AI in the news. It's also true that everyone hates scammers. So I think everyone, has either been affected personally or their relative has or their friend has. So it's something that we can all kind of rally behind and agree that scammers are not good people. Um, and she was just very charming and witty. And I think in the age of AI and automation and machine learning and all of those things, you can forget that actually a bit of creativity and charm and wit and humor and a story and a narrative, those things, which I don't think AI is very good at yet. Those things really kind of resonate with people and actually make campaigns, cut through and actually take effect into people's lives. So yeah, a hugely successful campaign for us. But I love talking about it because I think, yeah, it's a positive story about AI. But AI didn't come up with Daisy. That was, two creatives came up with that. So you've got to have both really, for it to work.
And I mean, that's a fascinating example of how AI can be used. And you're absolutely right, can be used for good. Um, how how do you ensure that how do the scammers, do they not know that they're actually engaging with
Gosh,
uh,
yeah, it's a very good question.
Daisy? Yes.
Daisy is quite the charmer. So if I just quickly describe what's going on kind of behind the scenes,
Please.
and how she kind of worked, she was actually an AI made up of about five different AI models. So a
Hmm.
model is, the thing that you train something into so that the AI then understands and on command can repeat what you've trained to it, if that makes sense. So for instance, we trained a large language model, or LLM, with her personality so that she had enough things to confidently talk about so that she sounded real. So she had real hobbies and passions, and she had a whole backstory and a family and where she lived and her, credit card details, everything we'd made up, obviously. But she needed enough things so that she didn't sound like a robot when talking to a scammer. And then the kind of beauty of AI is you train all of that information into the system, but then the system actually then learns and can repeat stuff back that maybe you haven't put in, but it knows the parameters. So it then kind of adds to the story. So for example, um, when she was talking to one of the scammers, she started talking about her cat Fluffy, which became quite a fun thing of the campaign. But we didn't tell the AI that she had a cat called Fluffy. it kind of invented that, but it fitted with her personality. Obviously, it's not the most exciting cat name you've ever heard, but it worked for her. And so yeah, so that was kind of her personality model, and that was really key for her being authentic. The next thing was the sound of her voice. Again, we started the process with, using you can use synthetic AI voices now. They're quite
Mhm.
common. You may have seen those on things like 11 Labs and those programs. They're fine, but again, they still, if you listen carefully, still sound a bit robotic and a little bit fake. So what we actually did is we recorded with her permission, and she was paid fair usage, one of the grandmas from the VCCP colleagues. So we put a call out to if anyone had a grandma that wanted to get involved in a campaign, would she be up for it? And we found, yeah, a lovely grandma who then we basically recorded her voice a bit like what we're doing now for about 2 hours. And
Mhm.
that became the training data that's needed to then train the voice model. So that then was able to replicate her. And that actually gave it more kind of realism when she spoke, because you've got all the intonations, the like pauses, the natural things that happen in conversation that even with the best voice AI models at the moment, they're not as convincing. So those things combined basically meant that if it's when the scammer call came through and Daisy was kind of switched into action, that she could sound as real as possible to I suppose keep the scammers on the line for as long as possible. I know it's a real funny one to get your head around, but
It really is.
really stuck to it. And yeah, she's appeared in, like, other journalists have spoken to her as well. I mean, that's quite nerve-wracking, but she does speak to people, and yeah, it's quite fascinating hearing what she talks about. There's lots to her that you don't know.
I feel like I should have Daisy on the podcast.
I know you may we might be glad to get her on. She's very busy.
Um, so look, this is a really, really interesting use case of how AI is being used in a campaign, which is clearly very, very positive. How else is AI being used in the marketing and advertising industry?
Oh, there's absolutely loads of different use cases. I think the main ones that I think are, I suppose, more game changing for the industry were, well, it was kind of a really quick one. A lot of creatives initially, they started using tools like Midjourney, Adobe Firefly, because when you're a creative, you obviously, brimming with ideas, but ideas are quite hard to communicate sometimes, especially to lots of different audiences or internal stakeholders. And you've got to do, quite a big bit of work to explain ideas, especially if ideas are a bit more off the wall and, yeah, a little bit hard to get your head around without maybe seeing what it will look like. The catch-22 is you won't see often what it will look like until you've gone into production, which by that point can be too late if someone
Mhm.
doesn't like it or it's not quite landing the right message. So a lot of the creatives started using it to mock up ideas. So in the olden days, I mean olden days as in 2 years ago, we often used Photoshop or like hand drawings or like, I suppose, like mood boards, that kind of thing, to convey an idea. Now, with a few prompts and the best image models, you can basically create the idea scamp. I don't know, we call them scamps. They're like kind of visuals of what it will be. And you can use that for things like storyboards, really important for conveying like film ideas. You can also add motion now to those images, so it kind of brings it to life in what we call animatics. So animatics are things that are often used as like a pre-tester for an ad going live, and you pre-test it to make sure that the messages have landed, the audience likes it. But that's quite a costly process to do that pre-testing. And so as real and as final images or video, the better, without, as I said, having to do the whole production. So
Mhm.
you're always like in this like kind of weird like middle ground where you've got to do as much as possible to get the idea through and convincing and hits everything that you need it to, but you don't want to spend the money initially to actually make it to then find out, oh, it doesn't quite work. So I think AI for marketing has been game changing for that bit of the process. One of the ideas that was a bit wild, we for Virgin Media, we do this kind of series of different TV ads. You may have seen it. We've had a walrus on a speedboat. we've had a cow riding a motorbike, we've had a goat gliding through the air, and the latest one is an elephant on a truck in Thailand. So it's all about kind of speed and the best broadband, but it's also just cutting through the kind of boringness of broadband communication. So yeah, but this is a bit of a kind of wild card idea, I would say. And actually the scamps that we did with Midjourney to show what a goat on a hang glider looked like, or a walrus on a speedboat, those were the things that really brought it to life and helped the idea land. So for creatives, it's kind of amazing because as great as Photoshop is, and drawing and all of the other techniques, they're much more time intensive. So actually it's kind of shortened that period, and you're able to get more ideas happening. So in the kind of creativity, efficiency and effectiveness, it's actually allowing us to do more creativity than less, which I think is really exciting.
I mean, clearly is in some ways quite cutting edge in terms of how how AI technology is being used. And therefore, in some ways, you're able to, as you said, cut through a lot of the barriers that we as consumers put up in terms of marketing and messaging that comes through. What are some of the implications then for the public as consumers as the AI gets better at kind of cutting through my kind of barriers, if you like, to kind of then influence me to behave in a certain way or to go out and buy a particular product?
Well, I think if that's more, I suppose, in where the agents and agentic AI is going, where you're kind of giving control to the AI to make decisions on your behalf. And that, I think, it's a very exciting space, but obviously you need to ensure that you have trained your AI or assistant or whoever to, if you're going to act on your behalf, that they know you quite well. But then at the downside of that is you're giving up lots of your information to the AI. So some people are not comfortable with that. But I do think it is, yeah, it's quite an exciting space. The other thing about the kind of creative limitations kind of being free now from, what used to be time, budget, resource constraints, all it's really meaning is if everyone has access to these tools, the bar for creativity is now much higher. So a creative's job might be a lot harder to really cut through, because a bit like how when TikTok came on the scene, everyone technically could become a TikTok creator if they wanted to, with hard work, obviously, with a good eye, good creative mind, with the filming skills. It wasn't like people just came creators overnight through luck. They all worked very hard, but it meant that the bar was much higher because the amount that people are seeing has gone up. So yeah, with everything, nothing is a quick buck or a quick fix, It just means that you're going to have to probably work a bit harder to get your ideas and your messages out. It's a true kind of core thing of Faith when we started, though. It's about accelerating creativity, meaning we can do more, and it means that we've kind of opened up people's imaginations. It's fascinating. We're in this, at the moment, there's so much potential out there. The only real thing stopping people is their imaginations. So yeah, anyone can
Yeah,
create videos now, anyone, but whether they're good videos is another thing.
true. And we've talked about an example of where AI is being used clearly for good with the O2 Daisy example. But equally, as you can imagine, there's an awful lot of concern about the dark side of AI, where AI is being used to influence or manipulate, even to the extent of being used to manipulate people to follow a certain trend of thought or to follow certain trends. Um, how do you see that playing out in terms of just being able to use this technology to influence, but in a negative way?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, unfortunately every technology comes with good and bad. When we started Faith, actually we thought about all the different technologies that have kind of come over the, last century, say. And unfortunately, with everything, there is the downside. So with electricity, there's, the electric chair came along with cars, car crashes came along. There's a lot that happens over time. And unfortunately, the whole using technology or whatever means possible to influence people is nothing new. There's, over history, we've seen that through papers and social media and different influential figures in the press, talking, saying their opinion, and unfortunately that's sticking. So whilst I'm not, like advocating for AI and not, blind to the fact that there's a negative side, it is ultimately up to the people using it to use it in a responsible way, and for us to have the intent behind every prompt. Is that really what we should be doing in the world? And unfortunately, having to remind people to be this responsible is an ongoing thing. But I do think the kind of the positives will hopefully outweigh the negatives, because if you think about, I don't know, how inefficient the internet is right now, for example, and how many web pages are just sat there not being used, costing money on servers, and all of that sort of side of things. If AI was to able to help tidy that up, make it more efficient, that would be a great thing. Also, that the AI in the healthcare space, that that space is super inefficient and could be revolutionized by AI, and actually would do a massive good in the world. So we try and stay on the more positive side, and we have always been the kind of more positive AI forward at Faith. But yeah, we appreciate, there is still, that's why you need ethics and responsibility with any technology. And I'm hoping that people are, aware of that with AI.
And absolutely. And I mean, one of the barriers to adopting AI in the health area is because people very often don't trust the technology, and even going one back, don't trust the providers of that technology. So there
Yeah,
is a trust issue there. Um,
obviously.
how do you ensure that AI is being developed in a responsible way? What have you all done internally to make that happen?
Yeah, very, very quickly we released an AI policy for the whole agency, and I think a lot of pretty much every company now must have an AI policy. We also set up Faith so that we had real people actually using the technology to make informed decisions, so that it wasn't just, oh, we've read this over here and maybe it's like this, but actually we got under the skin of it quite quickly. Um, we also, set out with kind of four guiding principles that we would only use it for good, for something ethical, for something in a transparent way, and the transparent bit is really key about the tools being used and whether they're, how they process their data and where they keep it and what data it has been trained on or hasn't been trained on. So all of that side of it, we were very hot on from day one, and our legal counsel was involved from the get-go, because as like anything new, you need to make sure you do it in the right way. The thing is, though, that the legislation will take a lot longer to catch up than the speed at which the tools are released and in put out into the world. So we do need to stay ahead of it and stay positive and AI forward, or else things will happen quite quickly if you're not involved.
Yeah.
But we do, genuinely believe that people have responsibility. There's loads of things coming out now that's it's quite interesting. Is that eventually people kind of self-police as well to a degree. So things like responsible prompting, not over prompting. So you're not asking for 50 variants when actually you only need five, or not asking for to rewrite things, enormous long piece of copy, because that takes up more server power and processing. So that there is this kind of responsible prompting side, which I find quite interesting, that people have now realized actually me asking for that is not a good use of the AI. There's and also choosing the right model for the task. So they're obviously like really, really amazing kind of deep research models, probably great for your field of work because you need to crunch a lot of information, a lot of data quickly. However, if you're just doing your packing list for your trip to France, maybe don't use that model. Maybe use a light version that is using a lot less electricity and power and processing time to find that answer for you. So yeah.
That's a very good point. And I'm not sure people are very often conscious
Yeah,
of what they are actually asking this AI system to do because it's like a bright, shiny toy. Everybody just
yeah.
wants to go in and ask any and every question.
And if
Um,
you, depending on what you prompt, you might get a really bad response because you haven't thought about exactly what you're asking for from the get-go. So it might take you three or four goes to realize what you're actually asking for, but maybe you should have done that before you
yes,
asked the AI. But that's life, and that is how people operate.
yes. Um, I guess one of the things I see going on, and which for me particularly affects the marketing, the advertising industry, is that on the one hand, the agencies, yours and others, are using generative AI models, which is great, but very often those models are built on proprietary data, and clearly there's a tension there because on the one hand you want to be creative, but then the people who put the who kind of allowed or put their ideas that the models are being trained on aren't necessarily being recognized and remunerated for that. How, how do you see this tension playing out?
Yeah, it is a very good question. And it's something yeah we think about a lot because it's like, when social media came along, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, upload all your content," and now we're told, "No, no, don't upload it because it will be bad and you don't know where it's being used." So it is sort of the kind of similar thing where it's sort of happened now, and these models now exist and they're being used an enormous amount. If you think of ChatGPT and like the monthly users, it's just outstanding, and everyone wants the models to be as good as possible so that the results are good.
Hmm.
But they forget that the flip of that is, well, they need to be trained on something, and to get that something, I think really the tech companies should be like buying up a lot more data. And I think that there will be a moment in time where there'll be some kind of content creator exchange where it probably won't be very much and the creators probably won't be very happy about it, but there needs to be some remuneration to those kind of big either content libraries or like I don't know, the whole, I think it was Reddit quite early on closed all their, crawling because they were like, we've got the most valuable data here. We've got real user information and opinions and it's so rich. So yeah, I think one that side of it, companies who've got a lot of data will realize that's very, very valuable and want to be paid for it. But then also creators, hopefully there will be some kind of creator royalties exchange. There are tools like Firefly from Adobe that, and luckily Adobe owned a huge stock library, so they were able to very quickly monetize that and make sure that the creators were paid for it. So we use Firefly a lot for a lot of kind of, I'd say more kind of basic jobs like backgrounds and generative fill, like filling in if you're doing a really widescreen thing or a really narrow portrait thing, you might use generative fill to fill in that kind of gap. That's all great. The problem with Firefly, if we're totally honest, is it has huge gaps in its training data. And so that means the output often when you're asking for something isn't very good. So, for example, it's not trained on any sports or kind of like active type shots because sports photo libraries, you have to pay a lot of money for that.
Yeah.
So if you ask Adobe Firefly to produce a picture of like a stadium and a football match happening, it won't do it very well because it doesn't have that training data. So yeah, we're at this weird inflection where everyone wants the tools to be as good as possible, but then we also need to start paying people for that, whether that's through big companies and big publishers and whoever owns all the data, or through individuals. Unfortunately, I think the individuals won't be paid very much. It'll be like Spotify, where it's pennies going as royalties, but that's a whole other debate for another
And,
day.
I mean, to make that happen, what do you think policymakers should be doing to ensure that AI is used ethically and responsibly? And part of that for me is, very well recognizing the people that have created the content and they're putting the content out there, which the models are using.
Yeah, I think they just need to get on with the system that does the fair royalties. Like that seems to be the most logical. We've seen it before with a lot of different. tech that's come over the years. Spotify is the most obvious one. But there are systems in place that do this. Like all of the stock library sites do this. And as I said, they're the first ones that were like, wow, we can actually train models on all of this data that we own because we've paid people for it. So I think it's just that needs to happen as quickly as possible, and obviously that takes time with the legislation and all of that. But I think that's possibly the only solution for now. Or yeah, the tech companies do quite a big payout, I guess, as well. But we'll see if that happens.
Alex, if I were to transport you from this podcast interview right now into a boardroom,
Oh God.
um, or perhaps transport an avatar of you from here into a boardroom, and this organization's board said, Alex, we're thinking of incorporating AI into our marketing, into our ad campaigns, into kind of how we operate. What advice? What would you say their priorities ought to be? What should they be focused on?
Right, the absolute number one is what is your training data? So as a company, no, I'm not talking about customer data here, so nothing that's customer related. I'm talking about as a company, what data do you have? So, like, for example, when you create images, brand characters, photography styles, you commission a photographer, that is your like brand DNA data that you own. We didn't used to talk about it like that. It was just pictures, nice videos, but actually that is, yeah, your core brand assets. If you don't know where all that content is, as in it's on servers here, there, and everywhere. It's in files. It's on a brand DAM, they call them, a
Mhm.
digital asset manager. If you don't know where that is and you can't, and he hasn't been categorized well, that would be number one job. The second job then I'd say would be making sure you've got the rights for all that content. So when you are making films and things, you often have music rights, you have talent rights, you have if you're a character, if you do character design, you've had some kind of illustrator. So ensuring that anything that's within that content, you have then basically done what we're now calling like an AI buyout usage. So you go back to the original creators of those characters or that photographer and go, look, we want to use your content to train an AI on our brand. So it is the dream really as a brand. You go, we've got all these great things and we want to be able to replicate that 10 times faster. Brilliant. But unless you've done the kind of back end work and cleaned the training data, ensured the usage, paid people fairly, you are going to come up against some big hurdles very soon. So that is it doesn't sound very exciting, but honestly, like you could train an AI model on anything you like, but if it's what you put into it is what it's going to learn. And I suppose the kind of hard pill to swallow for brands is brands change their mind quite a lot on their like key messaging, on their look and feel changes too often, we think. So if you haven't got that as a solid base and enough training data and you're not like really, really strict with how your brand shows up, the AI it will be a mess because the AI will learn bits that's wrong. And then you'll be like, oh, where's that come from? Oh, it was from this random asset over here and it's learnt that and it shouldn't have learnt that. So being really, really strict on your training data, number one. The second is with the kind of explosion of what we call GEO. So it's like SEO, so like search-based optimization. That do you remember that when that came along and
Yeah.
websites had to be remade for SEO to be able to be found by Google? Instead of being found by Google now, you are now trying your brand is being found by LLMs. So these LLMs basically go and scrape your website. They scrape third-party sites. The most trusted at the moment are Reddit, Wikipedia. I think Forbes is up there, FT. So they are scraping those sites for anything, any information about your brand, and then it will kind of deliver that information about your brand to a customer through the large language model. So because of this, what you've really got to do now is really think about what's on your website or your social media. Any old content, get rid of because it's going to be scraping that. And it might pull up, an advertising idea from, I don't know, 4 years ago. And you're like, where's that come from? Or it's pulled up a proposition that was completely out of date And that's what's going to be served to people who are searching about your brand. They could be searching for all sorts of things, but that's, I suppose, going to be quite a big game changer. So I'm calling it like a digital footprint cleanup of a brand. So making sure that anything that's out there you control or you've cleaned up.
What does
Um,
GEO stand for? Sorry.
but yeah, sorry, GEO. There's a lot of debate whether it should be AEO, GEO. It's basically SEO, but for the generative engine optimization. So
Okay.
that that seems to be the one that's sticking, but AEO came along as well. It's like, I suppose, a like artificial engine optimization. LLM search is another one because people kind of understand that a bit more. Was like, okay, I'm like asking LLMs for information about, a new product or service, or, I want to switch banks, or whatever I want to do. I'm asking the LLM first. So yeah, it's a very different world, but I think the 20 odd years of brands making content, putting it on their websites, apps, like social media, all of that is now coming to a bit of a head where you're like, oh, all of that content can be found and scraped. And is that how we want our brands to show up in an LLM? So, GEO, watch this space. It's going to be big.
Alex, thank you so much for being on the AI Adoption Podcast. You've provided some absolutely fascinating insights into the world of advertising, marketing, and given us some solid examples of how AI could be used for good. But more importantly, I really like that you were able to take this really balanced view to recognize that, whilst it can be used for good, that does have a dark side as well. But we need to be aware of that. And Faith has clearly got a clear set of principles that it operates to, which is very powerful. So thank you so much for being on the AI Adoption Podcast.
Thank you very much, Ashley, for having me.